obviously personnel changes some, but the way that you guys started that game late last year against them, is there anything you can take from that, especially offensively,
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting in the work week, you start off Monday with some game film. You're watching games. The game they just played, obviously they played Monday night. Watch that, and then you get into all the cut-ups during the week, whether it's third down, short yardage, goal line, red zone, and then you go back and you start watching the games again, just finishing up on Houston. And in a playoff game, if you watch the tape, I think at halftime it was 10-6. Or it was real. For Houston, they started slow with some turnovers, and I'm right. It's the second time I'm watching, but I'm right in the third quarter. So we started fast last year, and I thought, if you looked at the third downs in the first half compared to in the second half, a lot of it was just the early down efficiency with run and pass. So obviously that's important.
Some of the defense players said this week, kind of getting back to the basics, tightening things up. How did the week go with those things?
I think good. I think, look, we all look at, as teachers, hey, how we can clean some things up. The player with a clear head and knowing exactly what to do plays faster, and then our job is to make sure we don't slow them down before the snap. So I thought we had a good week.
Sean, even before the calf, the back, what were you seeing with Evans? Just kind of utilization the first couple of
Yeah, I think it was probably too early to tell.
Yeah.
Certainly he's going to play a big role for us. And so 2 games in, it's.
Were injuries a factor with that?
No. I think the back became a factor during the game last week, so no.
You carried Nate Atkins for a couple games. You really like him. Is there something special, unique about his qualities that
he does a lot of things? He does the thing that we found, in college, he was predominantly a blocker. I mean, I think we had to watch 11 games to see him have a catch. But he's one of those guys that he's physical and he is a good receiver. He can do a lot of things well. So we'll see where he's at.
Over the years, when a team plays that much of a shell or the 2 deep, have you been one of the people who thinks you can run people out of that? Or?
Yeah, and look, when a lot of it, so they play a soft coverage shell, and yet, man, there are a number of times where they're buzzing into the box, and so they do a good job with what looks like one thing, and so in this Texan game, a lot of it is down and distance driven, and in the self scout as to our run pass, as a play caller, I'm always thinking single safety, shell, or pressure. Single safety, shell, or pressure. And I think defensively there's some similarities as to looking at what offenses are doing, what's the down and distance, and then what's the history of this play caller relative to run or pass. So, trying to, and sometimes it's more difficult than you think, but trying to go opposite of maybe what your predictability or what AI would say you're going to do.
Coach, after the Colts really made announcements to take Courtland Sutton out of the game last week, did you try to get him involved early in this?
I think it's important. He's one. I think it's important in the third down. I think it's important in the red zone, and then throughout the game plan. Yeah. There's a number of things.
You talk a lot about the race to improve. Obviously, you make corrections after every game, but do you try to measure that improvement as you're going through the first?
Yeah.
You try to.
Well, and in the film of the next. The next test that we get back will give us more information, and that's the next game. And that's why that Monday is more important than the Sunday game that was just played. It's really accelerating the game, the game after.
How do you assess how Justin Sternad's been looking? A sack in each of the first 2 games.
Good. I think the experience from a year ago certainly has helped him. He's smart, and I think that he does. He's a guy that can play in coverage, and it's good to see him, with the production rushing the passer.
Sean, how did you project him when you first got here? Because there weren't that many defensive snaps.
Yeah, well, I came in, and the rule of thumb would be, let's go by what we see. I know how he was described. He plays well on special teams, and we had a starting linebacker, so he was linebacker 3. But I think most importantly is when you do come in, you come in kind of with a blank slate. Try not to prejudge any of them. That year I coached that 6th grade team, our running back had been the right tackle in 4th and 5th grade. And then one day I said, well, let's give this guy a try at running back. And these 6th graders looked at me. He's like, well, such and such is the running back. And I said, well, let's just give this guy a look. And he went on to play in college at running back. And so it was probably one of the best moves we ever made. And then in 6th grade, you got to be able to run the ball. Throwing it's difficult. So, it was a good position change for him.
Kenny Wazirike had his highest snap count of his career last week. How's he look to you getting this?
Good. He's I would say he's in form. When a player has a year off, I don't care who it is or a coach, it's difficult. And so to sit a year and then come back, and he was a young player when it happened. It wasn't like he was 6-7 years in. So good. He's when his pad level's right, boy, he's tough.
Sean, does improvement start this week in just cleaning things up from the first 2 weeks? It seems.
Well, it began in earnest. It began, throughout the preseason, and so, you're searching for that perfect game, and it's an imperfect game. That Shangri-La, if you will, that you're always looking for. Now you play some that are close, but it's an imperfect game, and I think the one thing that's very important for the player is to get on to the next play. Get on to the next play, and don't carry that snap. We'll address that snap, and so that's kind of a constant message. Let's get on to the next play.
Sean, how pivotal is this one considering LA's
They're all important. I mean, no, it's week 3, and so I'm waiting for, is this a must-win?
Sure.
Listen, it's an important game. It's a division game. All right? It's an important game, obviously.
One thing you talked about back in camp is in terms of the run game, not letting the defense dictate what you do. Obviously, from week 1 to week 2, there was a notable improvement there. Is that just more so about lining up and going versus a specific?
Yeah, sometimes it's what you're seeing from a defense, and then sometimes it's the packages. If you get into an RPO, you're calling it. It may very well be a pass. There's certainly a list of plays that are calling run-its that you're going to run. And so. And what do we think? Last week you looked at Indianapolis. They started early throwing to run. So I think a lot has to do with the defense.
We talk about being clean, the way that they play defense, and make it even more important on the penalty front to not put yourself on.
Yeah, I think that's important. We got a good crew this week. This is a crew that would be in the lower end compared to last week. We had a crew that was at the top end the last 2-3 years. This crew was heavy on the behavior fouls, but on the low end of overall penalties.
This is a little odd. They played 3 division games.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I when the schedule comes out, over the years I've learned I just look at oddball travel, and for them to to have played the division by the time they get to week 4, that's unusual.
I know you mentioned the referees to players in terms of.
We do a report. So this morning we do the officiating report. We do last year's numbers. We do this year's numbers. Then we do special teams, defense and offense. What are the fouls they're calling? Where does that rank? And then we do a backdrop on the referee. Where is he from? How did he get this job? How long has he been in the league? Wife and children's name, everything.
Does that come into play for you as a coach in terms of calling plays?
I think I don't know that it it's important information when you see spikes that you communicate that during the week. If they have if this is a crew that's each crew has some DNA to what they call, and I think it's important that we just know what that is. Even if it's a crew that's light on the fouls, they may be real heavy in this one area. And so post snap, any taunting, all that other stuff, so you need to know that.